Welcome back to another episode of HealthCap Weekly Wrap.
Today, we're covering everything from seasonal fall risks and mobility testing to some eye-opening studies on palliative care access, hospice preparedness, and even how federal policy may affect survey activity during a government shutdown. It's a lot, but every story touches on the daily reality of serving and supporting residents in senior living communities.
Let's get started.
So it's autumn. The leaves are turning, the air's getting crisper, and if you work in a senior living community, you probably already know this is also the time of year when we see more falls.
Exactly. Physicians Weekly had a really thoughtful article recently by Dr. Richard Stefanacci. He talks about how the typical fall prevention strategies, things like good lighting, clearing clutter, installing grab bars, are still crucial, but we also need to go a step further.
Right, he introduces this model called FLIP. It stands for Falls Limiting Injuries Program. The idea is, instead of thinking only about preventing falls, which of course we still want to do, we also focus on reducing injury if a fall happens. Because for many residents, a fall isn't always avoidable. But how serious that fall is, that's something we can influence.
And one of the most interesting tools mentioned is a wearable airbag system called the Tango Belt. It looks like a regular belt, but when it senses a fall, it deploys airbags around the hips. In clinical trials, it significantly reduced the rate of hip fractures. That's a huge deal.
Huge. A hip fracture can change a resident's entire trajectory. Loss of mobility, independence, increased risk of hospitalization, and even mortality.
And the thing is, it's not just about tech. The article also emphasizes a team-based approach, so pharmacists making sure meds aren't increasing fall risk, physical therapists working on balance, caregivers being trained to recognize mobility issues early.
Exactly. Fall prevention is a team sport, and this model of thinking about both prevention and injury reduction, especially in the context of seasonal risks like slippery leaves and uneven walkways, just makes sense.
It's also empowering, because when you shift the focus from fear of falling to confidence in recovery, it changes how residents and staff approach mobility. You're giving people tools to keep moving, not just reasons to be careful.
And that's the big idea, supporting movement instead of restricting it. That's where independence and dignity live.
And maybe we also need to look at how our environments adapt as seasons change. Are sidewalks getting cleared quickly? Are lighting timers adjusted for earlier sunsets? Even things like wet leaves by an entrance can turn into major hazards for someone with mobility issues.
And when you're already short-staffed or running full tilt, those little details can get missed. But they make a big difference, especially when it comes to preventing something as life-changing as a hip fracture.
So maybe now's a good time to walk your community with fresh eyes. What seasonal hazards are creeping in that we've stopped noticing?
Now that we're talking about mobility, it's the perfect time to bring up this piece from Medscape on the sitting rising test.
Yeah, the SRT. I think a lot of folks might not have heard of it, but it's surprisingly powerful. It's a test that measures how easily someone can sit down on the floor and then rise back up, using as little support as possible.
It's scored out of 10 points, with deductions each time you need to use a hand, a knee, or lose balance. The higher the score, the better the physical function. And here's what's fascinating. Studies have found that lower scores are associated with a significantly higher risk of mortality.
That's pretty remarkable. I mean, we talk about blood pressure and cholesterol as indicators of health, but something as simple as getting up off the floor can be just as predictive, especially in older adults.
It's such a clear reminder that strength, balance, and coordination aren't just quality of life issues, they're survival issues.
And while we're not necessarily putting every resident through this exact test, the concept applies. Watch how someone gets out of a chair. Are they pushing with both hands now? Do they hesitate? Those little signs matter.
It also reinforces how personalized care has to be. Two residents with the same diagnosis might have very different levels of mobility and very different risks.
And it's a great reason to keep investing in movement-based programming. Seated yoga, tai chi, balance training. Even incorporating flexibility into daily routines can make a big difference.
Exactly. It's all about noticing those changes early and giving people the support to maintain or even improve their physical function. Prevention through movement, that's the message.
And maybe this is also a call to rethink how we talk about exercise in senior living. For some residents, that word might be intimidating. But if we talk about staying strong to keep doing what you love, walking to dinner, gardening, getting out with friends, it feels a lot more personal.
Because ultimately, mobility is about access to independence, to choice, to community.
Now let's switch gears and talk about something heavier, but equally important, palliative care.
JAMA Network Open published a major study looking at over 1.5 million Medicare beneficiaries who died between 2018 and 2023 with poor prognosis cancers. And while there has been improvement in palliative care use, the numbers are still not where they should be.
Yeah, only about 37% received specialist palliative care before death. That means nearly 2/3 of people with terminal diagnoses had no access to that support.
It's frustrating because we know that palliative care helps. It manages pain, reduces hospitalizations, helps families cope, and improves quality of life.
The good news is that outpatient palliative care visits have nearly doubled, which means more people are being reached earlier in the disease process. And it's interesting to see how the workforce is shifting. More of that care is now being delivered by nurse practitioners and physician assistants.
Which is really encouraging. It shows that expanding access doesn't always mean adding more physicians. It means better training, better collaboration, and a more flexible team.
And this is where communities can really make a difference. We often see residents long before their condition becomes critical. If we can recognize the signs, have those conversations early, and build relationships with palliative care providers, we can change the story.
And it's not just about terminal cancer. Palliative care is appropriate for many serious illnesses: heart failure, COPD, dementia. It's about comfort and support, not just the end of life.
Exactly, it's quality of life. And residents deserve that at every stage.
McKnight's published a companion story that echoes the same concern. Most Medicare seniors with advanced cancer still aren't receiving palliative care. Despite all the data and guidelines, it's just not reaching people fast enough.
It raises the question, how do we get better at identifying the right moment to bring in palliative care? Because waiting too long often means missed opportunities for comfort and clarity.
And sometimes it's not even a clinical barrier. It might be a cultural or emotional one. Families might be unsure. Staff might feel awkward. But if we can normalize these discussions, we make it easier for everyone.
And it starts with education, helping staff feel confident, helping families understand what palliative care really is, and creating a culture where comfort is part of the care plan from day one.
Let's stay with that theme for a moment, because McKnight's also covered a really meaningful study on nursing students and their preparedness for hospice care.
Yeah, this one came out a little while ago, but it's still so relevant. It found that students who had a stronger fear of death, or who avoided thinking about it, felt much less prepared to care for hospice patients.
Meanwhile, students who viewed death as a natural part of life, what the researchers called neutral acceptance, were more confident, more compassionate, and better able to support families.
That makes sense. If we're afraid of death, we're going to avoid the topic. And in senior living, where end-of-life care is part of our reality, that avoidance can leave residents and families feeling unsupported.
It's a strong reminder that emotional readiness is part of clinical competency. And maybe we need to be doing more to help staff, especially newer ones, process their own thoughts and feelings around death.
Grief support, reflection groups, even storytelling can help. We all carry experiences with us, and creating space to share and learn can build stronger, more compassionate teams.
And it goes beyond clinical staff. Housekeepers, dining staff, everyone plays a role in the resident experience, especially in those final days. We all need that foundation of understanding and empathy.
Because sometimes the most important thing you can do for someone in hospice is just sit with them, be present. And that presence starts with being comfortable in our own understanding of what it means to die with dignity.
All right, now let's turn to our final story this week. A CMS update that's less emotional but still important if you're in a leadership or compliance role.
CMS recently revised Memo QSO 26-01-ALL, which outlines contingency plans during a federal government shutdown. This is from October 31st, 2025.
Basically, it clarifies what survey and certification activities will continue and which ones might pause if there's no federal funding.
The key takeaway is that anything essential to resident health and safety, like complaint investigations or situations involving immediate jeopardy, will still happen. But routine surveys, including standard recertification, could be delayed temporarily.
It's important to plan for that, especially if your community is due for a visit. Understanding which functions are impacted helps reduce confusion and allows you to focus on what matters most: resident care.
And in times of uncertainty, the clearer the plan, the calmer the team. That's really what this memo is about: transparency.
Exactly. Even when the systems around us are uncertain, our commitment to residents doesn't change. Knowing the playbook helps everyone stay steady.
And that wraps up this week's stories. From fall prevention to mobility, from palliative care to policy, we hope you found insights you can use in your day-to-day work.
Thank you for joining us today. And as always, you can find more details and links to every story we covered in the weekly roundup on Angie's blog at healthcapusa.com/Angie's-blog.
Take care of yourselves, take care of your teams, and we'll see you next time.